So, ladies and gentlemen, this is, tonight was kind of an interesting night as it was set up. The HCC board, as you may know, meets generally once a month. We get together to debrief any forums that we've had and talk about the trajectory of where we're going and take the feedback of lots of folks. We have been working through a grant process and so forth in the last, I don't know, maybe 2 to 3 months with partner folks that we've tried to find that all of the good work that HCC's done in the last couple of years, trying to figure out all the ideas that our townsfolk have and how to put them in such a fashion that we can take some concrete, actionable steps. So tonight you're going to hear about a process in which it's going to take us there. By the way, I'm Scott Farnsworst, one of the HCC board members. We're going to welcome our guests and our facilitators for the night, Jodi and Ann from Marlborough College, who are going to work with us, and they've been meeting regularly with the HCC board, so we're really excited about this evening. If you look around, I invite you to look around the room. As I stepped into this room, when we've had any number of these meetings, the audience that comes, it's very interesting. Tonight I find ultra interesting in our audience.
Ooh, I'm intrigued.
But it's great, and you'll find out why as the night goes on. Some of tonight came about because we put out specific invites. We wanted to hear from various sectors of our community, which is what was kind of tasked to us as board members in terms of where we're headed. So, enough of me. Welcome, Jodi and Ann, and thank you for your help.
Great, thanks. It's great to see you all here, and the couple board meetings that we've been at have been really roll up your sleeves, get to work, happening affairs, and it's been really impressive. So the first thing I have to confess is a really big oops that I can't believe I didn't even notice till I got here. I first saw one announcement for this meeting, so I'll try to blame it on Hartford, that said 6 o'clock. The other two said 6:30. Well, guess what I did? I started with 6 o'clock. So I don't know if you want to even change this. I think I've changed it. You'll just have to trust me. We want to spend most of our time on the interactive process where you folks are going to be working on coming up with what we call some headline indicators. And that is right now at 7:10 to 8 o'clock. We're going to have that probably start about 7:15, which still gives a good amount of time for that. So I'll just start with that little whoopsie that we had. As for introductions, I think we're not even going to introduce well, maybe we'll just let everybody really quickly. It is kind of good to know who's in the room. So let's quickly start with you. Go ahead and just say your name and either your organization or what it is that brings you here.
I'm Jackie Pierce. I'm a member of the Wits End Parents or Family Support Group.
Great.
Lindsay Pierce, and I'm just a community member.
I'm Jennifer Grant with Windsor County Partners, and I'm actually going to give a very short shout out. We're actually looking for a couple more female youth referrals that we would like to match with mentors. So if you know a female between the ages of 7 and 12 that needs a mentor or would benefit from a mentor in her life, the referral form is on our website. So.
My name is Peter Merrill. I'm a member of the school board, and I'm here for mercenary reasons. I'd like to collect signatures to get a petition to get on the ballot. And there are lots of voters here.
To run again for a school board or?
Yes.
Great.
I'm Dennis Brown of White River Junction. This is the first time I've been to one of these, but while I was here, I thought I'd do what Peter had just mentioned. I'm going to run for a select board again. I did last year, and so I also got a petition if anybody's willing to sign.
This is Susan.
Sandy Mariotti, Select Board.
Simon Dennis, I'm also Select Board, and I'm the liaison to the HCC.
John Boughton, I'm not running for anything.
Yeah.
Simon Butler, making sure he's not.
She might be though.
Scott Farnsworth, community member, and I will say that for the last 18 years, I have never once had someone say, we are looking for youth mentees, so to speak. Every time that is unbelievable. So hear that we have
Yeah,
the
good.
mentors that are, now we can go the other way. Wonderful.
My name is Shannon Ebbinghaus, and I'm Colonel Ebbinghausen's wife. Just here for support for him.
Carl Ebbinghaus, Hartford Police Department.
I'm Phil Caston with the Hartford Police Department, and also a resident of the town and father of 3 boys in the school system here.
Dylan Kreis, community member and member of the newly formed Community Resilience Organization of Hartford.
Rebecca White, and I'm on the select board in town. Madeline Koff, student at Hartford High School. Started a student health activist, so trying to connect with you.
Thanks for coming. Great.
And a student member of the school board.
Yes, excellent.
Nice. I'm Emily Musty. I work at Lebanon High School as the SAP, but I'm on the HCC board and the Altogether Regional
So
Community
probably
Coalition board.
everybody knows what SAP means, but just in case.
Oh, student assistance providers. I work with the guidance counselor, more supporting emotional, social emotional health and wellness.
Thanks.
Alicia Johnson, I go by AJ, and I am the diversion case manager for Hartford and on the HCC board.
I'm Nancy Russell, and I'm the owner of a child care center here in White River, and I serve on the board of directors for Prevent Child Abuse. And I'm also a Rotarian here in town, and I'm also running for school board, and I also have a petition.
You can sign more than one.
That's right,
Just let you know.
absolutely.
Yes, I'm Gail Ottman. I'm a member of the White River Rotary Club. I work at the Comfort Inn here in White River, and I also work at the Welcome Center in the railroad station. So I have an opportunity to interact with visitors and residents alike. So it's sort of a mixed bag, so I have a chance to interface with a lot of different people.
I am Kathy Lemire. I'm here on behalf of Health Connections of the Upper Valley, but I'm also a community member and live here in White River as well.
I'm Barbara Farnsworth, and I live in Hartford. I'm the mother of 3 little people who go to our school system. I work for Second Growth, and we work with young people around substance abuse concerns, and I'm on the board of HCC.
I'm Jan Eberly. I'm a public health nurse with the Vermont Department of Health, right across the street.
Laney Collins, a concerned community member.
Scott Cooney, I'm a resident, father of 2, a high school student and a elementary school student, and I'm with the fire department.
I'm Scott Hausler. I'm a community member and live in Wilder. I've got 3 kids. Two are out of high school, and I've got 1 in high school. I'm on the HCC board as well, and I work for the Town of Hartford Parks and Recreation Department. And I'm also a Rotarian.
I'm Claudia Merritt, and I'm a substance abuse prevention consultant with the Department of Health.
I'm Jackie Baker, and I work for Altogether, which is the Substance Misuse Coalition of the Upper Valley, and I co-coordinate it with Angie Leduc and Aita Romaine.
Norman Mariotti, Hartford Fire Department.
Sean Hannis, fire department.
Mike Tidwell, Fire Department.
Ian Duffy, Fire Department, community member, and 2 kids who will be entering the school system soon.
I'm Brianna. I'm here with the Community Access TV station, just documenting
Very
what's
good.
going on.
Angie Leduc, the Drug Free Communities Partnership Coordinator, co-coordinating with Jackie for Altogether, and also an HCC board member.
I'm Gavin, and I'm here because of my parents.
Yeah, I understand. So what's clear to us is that everybody wears several hats. You're here maybe for your profession, you're here as a parent, you're here as a resident. And when we work on collective impact, we kind of bring all those different roles together, and the more the merrier. So I hope that as you do work tonight, that you will be looking at this from the role of, if you are on the fire department and you have 2 kids who are going to be in the school, and you have a sister who had a drug problem, and you know somebody on the select board, and you're thinking of how the parks can be better. All those really fit into this. So I'm going to do something that, wow, I say that I can give a short review of RBA basics, but woo, this is going to be a quick one. So results-based accountability is a framework for measuring planning, and doing. And that is the framework that we're using, that we have brought to bear here, and that we have brought from Marlborough College, and that I've taught and used with lots and lots of different organizations, as has Jodi. And I'm just going to share from the presentation that I gave here the first time, which was also a quick one, but that was like 25 minutes, but we're gonna do it in 3, because the smarter people are here today, and you don't need that 20 minutes. So the thing about results-based accountability that's so exciting is that you get from thought or planning to action right away. It's not a process where you spend, well, you don't spend, you do collect data. Data is very important, but it's not like the data collection is over here and the planning is over here and the doing is over here. It happens all at once. And one of the beautiful things about results-based accountability that has been so interesting for me, and I think once you start thinking this way, you can't go back, is that it goes from ends to means. We start out with, where is it that we want to get to? So many of us are used to, well, we got a $50,000 grant to combat drug abuse. Let's take a whole bunch of ideas and, try them. Or, I know this worked in someplace else. Or, we've been doing this, let's do some more of it. And some of that works and some of it doesn't. But the beauty of results-based accountability is we start with, where is it that we want to get? And then we talk about, what is it that we want to see change? What do we want, what are the measures, which we call indicators, that we want to see either get better or, either lessen or increase, that can show us that we're reaching to that end. There are 2 levels of accountability. One, which we're working with here, and you will get to the other level after we say goodbye. So one is the population or community level of accountability. And what that means is those results or ends that are not the responsibility of one program, a school, a doctor's office, the fire department, but are the result of lots of different folks working together. So it's really another way of talking about collective impact. Understanding that if we want to make real change on complex issues, it's not one organization's responsibility. It takes all of us. Yet, programs are also responsible for what they do. So there is also program level accountability. Let's talk first for a minute about population level accountability. And some examples that I shared with the group were Rutland City children are ready for school. You can see that that is not the responsibility of just one organization. Although we often make the mistake of saying, Head Start is you. Which you can understand Head Start certainly has a role in that, for example. But who else, just very quickly, who else would have a role in all Rutland City children are ready for school?
Parents.
Parents?
Sorry.
Parents, I say I'm a teacher, physicians.
Yes, absolutely.
And they're not always that good about that. Preschools, libraries.
Right, other community resources. So that's just one example. Windham County adults lead healthy and productive lives. Vermonters have access to safe and affordable housing. You can see that those are those high-level, population-level measures. So it's very important to understand what's a population or community level result that we all want, that we takes many folks working together. And what is a program level result? You don't get off the hook if you're working at a community level result to also set your own program level results. So, for example, in a school, it's reasonable to have a measure, and many schools have this, that children are able to read by grade 3. Now what's interesting is you could say that also has some population level, sometimes at the population level you might set that too. But clearly, if you're a school, if you're an elementary school, and most of your kids aren't reading by grade 3, that's a pretty clear indication that something is going wrong with your program. or if the number of kids who can read by grade 3 is going down over time, that's clearly a program level measure that you're responsible for. What you're not responsible for as a school, even though we hold schools accountable for it, is something like all children graduate high school ready to work and go to college. That's a very common measure, but you can see how a school shouldn't really be held totally responsible for that. There's pieces that the school. So now you understand results-based accountability, the 3-minute version. Isn't that amazing? Do you want to add a couple words to that? Is there?
I mean, that's pretty succinct in and of itself. I think the only thing that I like, in addition of the performance level, which I know we're not going to be doing, are the 3 questions that get answered by results-based accountability when we're using that at the program level, which is how much we did, how well we did it, and is anyone better off? And that's the hardest question to answer, and it's the most important. Because how much is super easy, and that could mean a whole lot of things. And we're used to doing that. And we're used to doing that, accustomed to that. And how well, even, absolutely, customer surveys, feedback, absolutely, we have easy measures for that. But is anyone better off for our efforts? Well, that's the really important one, and it's tough to get, and we have to.
So I'm going to show this around because I just love this little cartoon. Maybe you can't see it, but I'm going to say it. So I love to show this because what it really is about is just like these wolves howling at the moon. But are we making an impact? And sometimes we're like those wolves howling at the moon, and we have the best of intentions, and we're really loud, and there's a lot of us. But if we haven't really set those measures of what it is we want to change, how we want to, in Mark Friedman's terms, and he's kind of the grand master of results-based accountability, we don't know if what we're doing is really turning the curve. So what have we done so far? First of all, I just want to give kudos to the folks who are on the board. It's been a tremendous group effort. And Barbara and Angie are incredibly responsive. They sometimes answer my questions before I even ask them, which is rather amazing. But it really has worked as a beautiful partnership from afar, which you don't know, but that's been really great. So we've actually accomplished, I think, a tremendous amount of work. And when I say we, I mean HCC, with not that much face time. This is our only third meeting together. The first was in October. So the first thing we did, or the first kind of major outcome of the first meeting, which was pretty important, is to come up with that community or population level result. Hartford is a supportive community where people can embrace and achieve their personal, professional, emotional, and physical well-being. This addressed the fact that HCC is really, serving. It was the idea that it's for the whole community. It's not just kids. It's not just people with identified problems. It's not just those things that pop up. It's really, and I always use the word aspirational. It's if everything was going great, if we were turning the curve on the measures that matter, if we were all working together towards collective impact, what would our community look like? And I have to say that we were so proud of this, and we immediately bragged about it back in Marlboro, and got it in some little publication that at least 48 people have seen, I think. But anyway, I think this is great, and I don't think we changed it, right? Yeah. So. I mean, I've sat with it now, we've all sat with it for several months, and certainly we could all maybe make some little tweaks or something. But to me, now that we've done some real work on what would it take to get there, I feel like this is still a really strong, positive, aspirational result. You never get to that result. You never quite reach it, that's why it's aspirational. But what we're doing now with HCC is making the plan so that where we put our scarce resources, our time, our energy, our money into those things that actually are going to bring us closer. So how do we do that? That brought us to our second meeting. And I'm talking a lot, so do you want to talk about how we came up with possible indicators?
Well, some of that was really, we need to have ways to tell the story of, well, what do we know about ourselves? What can we track? What are we already tracking? What do we know? And then what do we want to know about how we're doing and who's doing well, who's not doing as well, and what that might point to in terms of eventually what we might want to do about it. So we set the charge of, okay, what do we already know and where does it live? Who takes care of that information? How easy is it to get? Is it reliable? Can you get it consistently? And then what story does it tell? And so that's when we came up with a much longer list of potential.
This was meeting 2.
This is meeting 2, potential indicators. It was actually, what was it, 2.5 pages? It was a lot. It was many. So we went through that list and really culled through with the guidance of communication power. So is that an indicator? Is that going to tell us something that is really important, that people are going to resonate with, that could be either exciting or simply really guiding towards, wow, that says we are getting towards that. So communication power. Proxy power, which again, you're going to get your own copy of this, you can look at it. So even if it's not exactly what we want to know, is it close enough? Does it say, yeah, we are getting there, even if it's not exactly what we are hoping to know, because what we're hoping to know is impossible to actually get for whatever reason, either financially or logistically. It would just be really ridiculous to try and do. And then data power, that's the reliability thing. Can we get that reliably? Is it a trusted source? Is it going to be there for the foreseeable future? Do we have some back data so we can compare it to something else, so we can see the trends? So those are the 3 things that we worked with then,
Right.
and then we're going to continue to work with now.
Right, so indicators are those measures, and again, we're going to hand these out, but just examples are percent of high school students who feel they matter to their community. Percent of Vermont adults age 18 or older who have binge drunk alcohol in the last 30 days. Percent voter turnout. These are just some examples of the kind of things that we want to see, in some cases go up and in some cases go down, that we in HCC, meeting as a group, talked about were things that made a difference and that we could measure. Now, I have to tell you that the data power, as we found out very soon, is really, it's the tough one. We gather so much data from so many different sources, and in fact, we're another handout, which I have to say, I was really impressed at all the data that does exist for Hartford. This is a whole page of the data sources. For example, one that totally wowed me. I called Jodi and I said, Jodi, I only meant to spend half an hour on this, and I love this stuff, but I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Dartmouth Hitchcock and Alice Peck Day Memorial Hospital Community Health Needs Assessment. Who knows about that? That is an amazing piece of work, and I had to that's pretty nerdy, but I had to tear myself away. My husband's like, what are you still doing there? Because it really gathers tremendous, useful, helpful data. But it has one issue, which is that most of it is on the whole Upper Valley. There are a few really great numbers on Hartford. So, we're limited. I mean, Hartford's a little town. There's not a lot of money and a lot of oomph into collecting tremendous amounts of detailed data. So that's something that we have to decide is, if we pick data points that are for the whole Upper Valley, well, we're not going to be able to show by what we do through the HCC that we've changed those. So we really tried hard to come up with some indicators that, as you said, are proxies. They're not exactly what we want to know, but they're close enough that a reasonable person would say, yes, if you have increased, you know, in the youth risk behavior survey, the number of kids who feel that they matter to their community, that means that we're probably getting a little closer to this. There might be many other things we'd like to measure, but guess what? We actually have that measure. So that's part of what we did. And what you'll see, and I see these data people just nodding their heads, because we went back and forth on these quite a bit, and again, it was a real joy to work with you. I mean, I just feel it went very, very smoothly. You two came up, one thing you did was categorize, which was really helpful, so you'll see, rather than just being a big laundry list, we have physical well-being, emotional mental health under one category, reducing substance misuse, which I know has been a real big push, so that came under its own category. We have 4 categories, and that was really helpful. And then we kind of went back and forth on, well, this one's for the whole county. Is there something that, you know, could be a proxy that we can get for Hartford? We have included a few things in here still that are either for the health district, for the county, or for the Upper Valley. But by and large, I was very proud of us with all that, you know, sifting through all these reports. We actually did come up with a bunch of data points, which could be indicators, measures, that when you look at them, you'll, you know, this is going to be our job, your job tonight, is to say which ones really matter, which few do we want to select to actually, you know, put our time and energy and resources into to get towards this. So yeah, go ahead, Barbara.
And I would just add in terms of kind of framing this discussion that, again, I want to thank everybody for coming tonight. I know everyone's very busy this particular week as all kinds of things have cropped up in our town this week. But the reason that we wanted such a broad cross-section of community members here is because we really didn't just want the 10 people who are on the board of HCC to determine how to use the resources within the Hartford Community Coalition. So you're all part of this community. You either work here, you live here, you have some vested interest. And we really wanted the outcomes that we are going to focus on over the next 12, 24, 36 months to be ones that everybody in the community, or as many people as we could hear from in one evening, really felt like we should prioritize. So again, we really appreciate you being here, and we want to hear your voice. And when it comes to, you know, us measuring our impact, is anyone better off 12 months from now, or 2 years, or 3 years from now? We want to be looking at the situations that we discussed tonight, not just what, you know, the board decided that, you know, felt good. So that's what we thought we'd work on for the next 12 months. So I think, again, just so you understand why it's so important to us that you're all here, and I'm really pleased to see the cross-section of folks. And we're going to be able to jump in and do some stuff here, but I want to encourage you all to use your voice, because that's why we invited you here.
Thank you, Barbara. And that, again, is why it's so great that many of you have several different roles. Because I agree, it was so interesting, even from the first meeting to the second meeting, we had some new voices, and I mean, I feel like, I think we all felt like, you know, some things came up that those of us in the room the first time wouldn't have thought of. And so some of you, some things that we may have thought, oh, those are natural, those are definitely going to be on our final list. Some of you come from a different angle where, you know, you'll have a different point of view. Now, why don't we just work on all these?
Because we're all volunteers.
It would kill us. So there's such a thing as too much data. We can really drown in the data. And that's another beautiful thing about results-based accountability, is Mark Friedman talks about picking headline indicators, ones that kind of drive the others. So we know, for example, and I'm just making this up, you may decide this doesn't matter, but we know that if you bring down binge drinking among adults, you're probably going to bring down some other things that go along with binge drinking. You may increase overall health. You may reduce car accidents. You may reduce teen drinking if binge drinking among adults. You may reduce depression and suicidal behavior. So I'm kind of, you know, this isn't fact. I'm just telling you that, you know, some of what we kind of assume, but your assumptions will be based on your own understanding. So when you get in the groups and come up with what you think are the most important drivers that we can actually get the data for, you know, that's what I want you to think about, is what are some indicators, some measures, knowing that we can only come up with a few to work on at a time, and that, you know, it doesn't mean like, you know, oh, you're all my favorite children, you know, I'm throwing out some of you. It doesn't mean that we don't love these other data points. And so that's a really hard thing, is to say, but I really, really care about, you know, voter turnout. That is so important, and here's why. Well, voter turnout's a pretty easy thing to measure, so that would, but some of these that it might be a little harder and take some more work. It doesn't mean that it doesn't matter, it doesn't mean that it might not be in the second round. But what we're going to do today is be kind of brutal and actually come up with, by the end of tonight, we hope, we expect, 2 to 4 leading or headline indicators. And not only that, in our next meeting, which is going to be a lot of fun, because this is where you really get to experience results-based accountability, is we are going to do the turn the curve exercise on one of these indicators. We're going to choose which one, to talk about what would it actually, what do we know now, you know, who's involved, what's the story behind the story, who are the partners, what do we need to do, and then we're going to leave you, and then all you have to do is the hard work of planning and doing it. And we say, bye, good luck. So, any questions at this point?
It's not a question, but I guess a point of reference. HCC began a few years back, we purposely did not just stick with the adolescents. At the time, the adolescents is what kind of kicked this into gear.
Right.
But this statement represents really like EEE, kids up to our seniors. You know, we were gonna reach out to the Bugby Senior Center and have the director come over, Len, and so forth, because so when we're thinking in terms of the next hour plus, as we talk community, it really is great to have so many different kind of points of reference here tonight, but that's kind of what we're thinking about. If these gentlemen need some help, we can all join you. All right, thank you for doing what you're doing, appreciate it.
Thank you for having us tonight.
Very much.
Thanks for what you do.
I guess we're not gonna have the fire department.
Oh, we still have.
still got one.
Oh, very
We got
good.
the acting chief
All right,
right here.
all right. You're talking for everybody, that's great. Okay, Jodi, I'm gonna hand it over to you.
Okay, cool. So we're just gonna go through an exercise to get your minds going around how to maybe choose which ones you really want to work with and which ones maybe you can hold off on. What kind of process you might want to go through. So we're gonna pick one. I'm gonna give you guys 3 options of which one we want to play with for this exercise. So we could work with percent of adults meeting physical activity recommendations, 1, or rate of violent crime in Windsor County, or percent of high school students feeling they matter to their community. Which one would you like to play with for the next?
Can you say them one more time?
Yes. So, I've got percent of adults meeting physical activity recommendations, which in the data for here is 66%. Rate of violent crime in Windsor County, which is 1.3%. Or percent of high school students feeling they matter to their community, which is 45%.
I vote for number 3.
Number 3? 3? 3? 3? 3. Okay, we're gonna play with that one. Okay.
By the way, we're on understanding indicators as signposts in a community story.
Yes. So write it down.
So are you looking for standards of measure? Is that what you're looking for this, or?
Um,
Sure.
No, this is gonna be a way you prioritize what you want to actually have tell the story of your community's journey towards that, and how you're gonna pick that. So it's actually a little bit more subjective, as opposed to, I don't presume anyone in this room has really detailed scientific training on data measurement unless you have had that very, very specific training. This is for anyone to be able to go, yeah, that one, that makes sense to me. That tells me what I want to know about my community. So that's what we're going through right now. So, to their community.
And that's another piece about, that's another feature of results-based accountability, is Mark Friedman says, yes, you need good data, but to make these decisions, to decide what to work on and to measure, you do not need to be a statistician. You don't need to be grounded in, high-level data collection and analysis. You need to have some good sense and kind of understand what a reasonable person would think.
Okay, so thinking about it as a signpost, so we're all on the same bus, taking the ride towards that result. And we come across the sign on the way where, let's say in 5 years, this actually goes up something very significant to 55%. 10% increase in 5 years, that's not bad. That's a pretty good thing.
Right.
So, yes.
Is this an actual figure? I mean, where high school
This one
students
is.
polled and that's what
Yes,
it is?
this one is. So this one comes from
the data that we have, that we're gonna give you is actual data that between Barbara, Angie, me, and I don't know who helped, we spent some hours on this, didn't we? Yeah.
Digging and digging.
Let's actually have that for Hartford specific, or is that for Upper Valley?
Hartford specifically.
Yeah, that's Hartford specific,
Hartford
and
specifically.
we point that out too.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's say in 5 years it goes up to 55%, which is a pretty significant increase, statistically speaking. So let's take it back a little bit. Who are the main characters in the story about what happened to make that happen?
Teachers, parents must play a role in this.
Parents, okay, had a role. Who else?
Peers.
Peers. Who else?
Teachers.
Teachers.
Administration, school board.
Admin.
School board.
Community resources.
Community leaders.
Community leaders. And what was the resources one? I'm sorry?
Community resources.
Community resources.
Coaches.
Coaches.
Churches.
Churches.
Social media.
Social media.
Nonprofit organizations.
Nonprofits.
Employers. Mentors.
Yes!
For those of us visually challenged on this side of the room, can you read the statement?
Yeah, so we've got parents, peers, teachers, administration, school board, community leaders, community resources, coaches, churches, social media, nonprofits, employers, and mentors
Are all attributing to what statement?
are contributing toward the rate of high school students feeling they matter to their community, increasing from 45% to 55% in 5 years. Yes.
Youth organizations?
Youth organizations.
Boy Scouts, Boy Scouts,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
How about the police?
Yeah. Fire department perhaps as well.
Business owners.
Are business owners separate from employers?
They could be.
Okay, great.
I'm thinking of youth wandering social site.
Yeah.
Available social services.
All right, yeah, that's a good list.
Okay, I'm just gonna say, mental health and substance abuse providers.
Okay. As separate from available social services?
I think just getting a little.
Just
more
getting a little more
specific,
specific? Okay.
I think one of the things that's missing up there is recreational opportunities,
Okay, we do have coaches, but yes.
other than outside of school, though.
Yes,
Good point.
recreational.
Good point.
rec department is there a lot of that.
Opportunities, absolutely. Okay, so that's who. Awesome. So let's have a little bit of what. So let's see, these are posted, so stick this up.
I will write for you. Well, you will. I'll actually write for you.
Oh, wow.
So I'm gonna put this up here.
That's awesome. You can pick whatever color you want.
I really like this green. These aren't just called green.
No.
Forest green.
And I had deep sea blue.
Okay, carry on.
Okay, very good. All right, so if the story about those people and this indicator were to hit a publication locally, what kind of publication would it be? And it could be multiple. So if you were to read about it or see it, where do you think it would show up?
Upper Valley.
Upper Valley Magazine. Okay, write that down. And who reads that? People in the upper, everybody? Does everybody read that? No. So who generally reads that?
Subscribers, I see it like in a doctor's office or,
Okay.
you know, that.
Okay, so subscribers who actually subscribe and then almost accidentally because you happen to be there and it's there. Okay.
Oh, I'm not doing good with this. Uh-oh.
Yeah, that is a fun. That one's fun.
Yeah, no kidding. I think I'm gonna use the other one.
Yes.
Or just the wall. Oh, I think.
Yeah, that one is much sturdier.
Okay.
Okay. Where else might you read about high school students feeling that they matter, being on the increase?
Honestly, in today's day and age, Facebook.
Facebook.
And
Yep.
Instagram.
Facebook,
Hashtag I
social
matter.
Yeah. Who would post it though? Who's going to be posting it?
Yeah.
Okay, so the kids themselves. Do you think so? Do you think so? This is important. Yes? How would it be stated though? It's not going to be like, I matter! Or is it?
Hashtag I matter.
Hashtag I matter. So do you think it would be like maybe a campaign? Like,
Sure. I don't see them.
that would be awesome. Okay,
I
sweet.
have a question.
Yes.
But if you're not a Facebook person and you don't know how to use, you're
Yeah.
not into,
Yeah.
which many people aren't,
Yeah.
that level,
Yeah.
how are they gonna know?
How are they going to know?
Good
So
question.
there's this magazine, we have Facebook. Where else might this show up?
Word of mouth.
Word of mouth. And how does word of mouth spread around here?
So it's, say, for the teens, it's teen to teen.
Yeah.
Teen's friend might tell somebody else who might be either a parent or a friend of the family. Then it goes on from there and just, hopefully, we hear before it's something serious. That happened.
I would hope that the school board would put out something about this.
So they would celebrate it. They put it out in a newsletter. Is there a newsletter?
Well, the school board wouldn't do it necessarily, but the school administration, i.e. the superintendent's office or the principal's
I'll
office,
say school.
do those kinds of things.
Okay.
There are also a number of awards, dinners throughout the year, usually the accumulation of the year, where students who have done well are recognized and things like that.
White River Rotary is one of those that does it every month at the school.
Recognize the students at school.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, so if there were some students directly involved with that effort, perhaps even the hashtag I Matter campaign, they'd be invited to present on here's how that came about.
Can I
Nice.
point out
Yeah,
something?
absolutely.
Kids who we're really looking at already get kudos. I'm looking at a young woman who I have been mentoring for 8 years, who's come a long way. She's never gonna be part of this group. So how do we get her in? Because rah-rah, not everyone does sports, rah-rah, not everybody is honor society, rah-rah, all that. And it is a delineation socially. I mean, I watch it whenever I walk into any school.
Absolutely, you're totally right. So if the data is going to be true, if that story is going to be true in 5 years, 55%, that means that there was a broad increase, not just the same kids who are already thriving and they're thriving more. It's going to be across the board. So here's where it's going to show up. There might be some other places. Is there like an actual daily paper here
Valley
still?
News.
Valley News. Would it show up there? Maybe?
Yeah, we hope.
It could.
It could? Oh dear.
It could get fixed.
It sounds like my local paper. Oh dear.
There's a new startup that's publishes on the web called Daily Upper Valley.
Okay, and is that more reliable?
No, but it's new and they're scrambling hard.
Okay. Okay, so it would probably show up there, hopefully.
Maybe the creation of a student-based program that helps a student who's doing well, helps a student who's not. I was just asking, like a student who's having social problems, or maybe pick an area of problems, maybe mental health problem. And you can have students, have students help students.
Yeah.
That's getting to the solution, to the
That is
actual
getting,
strategy.
although what it could be is that there is some sort of media-based something or other that group is doing. They tell their own story.
They're just telling their own story.
They tell their own story. Yes.
If the school or students were to tell us about it, they might hear about it from the TV station, because we do get fun stuff like that.
Absolutely. And that would mean a lot. That would mean a lot. Yes.
Most high school students and kids that age, they feel like they're not being listened to.
Yep.
And even when we listen to them, we don't hear them.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have to ask them.
Mm-hmm. How do we do that?
You're going to have to, particularly the group that our teacher here spoke about, because they're not going to interact. They feel alienated oftentimes. They don't feel like they're being listened to. They want to be listened to and they want to be heard. And that takes time.
Yeah.
And most adults don't have that kind of time.
They don't have, it takes trust.
That too.
Yes.
Might we not hear about it from the reverse, and that is as a decrease in a crime rate or drug abuse?
Possibly. That's entirely possible. That is entirely possible. Might be one of the kind of the proxy ways that we hear about it. Yes.
Well, part of the issue is who's the audience.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when you're asking how would we find out, who is we?
Who is we?
So the high school students are going through the last stages of adolescence, which means that they are often trying consciously to avoid adults. Because they are part of, so you look for places where kids are interacting with the adult world if you're trying to see our view of where they're interacting in the community, but where do they see they're acting in the community? What do they count as their community? Question which this doesn't really answer.
Yeah. So the next question is what happened for the 55% to be true? What happened to those kids broadly? To all the kids, not just the kids who are already thriving, to a broad base. What happened? What is the actual story? The actual story is not we feel we matter. The actual story is what happened. What happened to them?
They're being listened to.
They're being listened to.
I think the generational gap has to have been bridged somewhere. There's a huge generation gap, and there has to be that bridge between younger generation and older generation in order to get that message out. And that's difficult nowadays too. Because of what Gail was saying, a lot of people aren't focused on Facebook or Twitter or those kind of things unless you're of the younger generation. And
So
to be able to
what can
bridge that
happen to
generational
bridge that gap? What would you actually see that's different in the community?
I would recommend advocation for the students. So what happened, they either got advocated for or they didn't get advocated for. So somebody not only listened to them, they heard them and then they took action.
Mentors is the big thing.
I think it's also giving students responsibility. Student leaders.
So empowering them?
Yeah, or just trusting them. Because it's not necessarily about empowerment, because I think it's about giving them, not even giving them the tools, but allowing them to use the tools they already have.
So like meaningful roles in leadership opportunities.
Yeah, not just assuming that they don't want to participate.
Right, right. So how would you reach them if there's a bunch of students who are like, don't come talk to me, I'm not going to listen to you? To offer them that opportunity.
I think you just, for the most part, have to offer it. I mean, I think the biggest problem is people tend to not communicate with young adults at the same way they communicate with someone their own age if they're in the older generation. So that ends up being it's about the tone that you take when you invite the offer.
Yes.
we have, excuse me, we have a very good senior center, a very active senior center that does a lot of programs and things that they do. Just listening to the conversation about mentoring.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a way to have our seniors interact with students in programs that either they get together and decide on what programs they want. Because the seniors can bring an awful lot of information, experience to these young people. Maybe they've been through the same thing a lot of these young people have and when they were that age. So maybe some sort of a mentoring, a matching of a little bit like the grandparent program.
Sure.
That would work with the students.
And there's also, let's see, where is it? There's also stuff that may have happened to all of these groups too, because these are all the main characters that you identified. So it's not just the youth themselves. Something happened with some of these folks. What may have happened with some of these groups?
We're going to see a decrease in deviant and destructive behaviors, things like that, as people's attitudes improve. They feel like they're making more of a contribution. More people are depending on them. Their self-destructive and deviant behavior is going to go down. You know, fewer involvements with the Department of Children and Family Services, fewer involvements with police, the courts, negative involvements.
I was going to say that those organizations begin to look at the youth as resources.
Oh, nice. Nice. And what might that look like specifically? For example?
Might be including them on boards, might be
Okay.
including them in activities that they're trying to do, projects they're trying to carry out.
Nice.
The VOTEC program at the school, from what I can see, is excellent. And that's a resource that can turn it around to be used with cover or other types of organizations in town as a resource.
Yeah, definitely. So I want to be mindful of the time because we want to get you guys the selection of actual indicators. But this is the type of things to be thinking about. One more.
I've seen that hand for a long time.
I think opportunities to act as a leader or whatever it is, because, so a church could offer a youth program in which the youth would lead. Boy Scouts could do something like the Eagle Scout program, which gives people opportunities. Political organizations could have kids who come in who are working to get out the vote opportunities, but there needs to be actual opportunities for you to make a difference. Otherwise, it doesn't matter how willing you are or engaged you may be, if there aren't those opportunities to actually step forward and make a difference. Something that is not in a great deal of good repute anymore, but often did this, in fact, was various ROTC kinds of programs where kids could join and they would quickly get recognized in leadership roles in ROTC. So there are different kinds of roles that exist for them to make a difference.
Right. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. So that's the kind of thinking to be doing when you're looking at these. Who are the characters that are impacted? And it's broad for each one of them, even if there is an age range indicated in one of them. Where would we hear about a change and what might happen? And by the end of tonight, how many are we hoping to have as the headlines?
We really want 2 to 4.
2 to 4. And this is a fairly long list at the moment. But 2 to 4 of these are going to be the winners. They're going to be the things splashed across all of those newspapers, including the not so awesome ones. They're going to be more awesome because these 2 to 4 indicators are going to be their headlines.
Right. Okay, so now we're going to get to work. We're going to roll up our sleeves. Is this the only room we have to meet in, or because we want 4 groups?
Hallway.
What's the first?
Hallway? Okay, so.
I think there's a room across the hall.
Okay, so we're going to have, there's going to be 4 groups. And I think it's going to be more interesting, rather than having you choose, I think we're just going to number off.
Yeah.
So, group 1 in the hallway, group 2 is here, group 3 is here.
By the food.
And group 4 is in the room across the hallway. So, here's the drill. We're going to quickly count off. If you're like me, you might forget your number, so write it down. Then everybody is going to pick up one of each of these, You're going to get in your groups, which should be about, 7 or 8 people each, I think that's about right, which is a great number for this. And then you're basically going to use those criteria that Jodi shared, which are right on here. Communication power, proxy power, and data power. Forgot what those mean? Look, they're on the back, including some examples. I just want to say one thing about all these data points. There are a few that we added because we realized we were kind of missing some, like there were a couple safety ones. We talked about maybe some more basic need ones. We have a couple that don't have data, and I've said how you could get that data by a survey or a focus group. I think it's fine if out of the 2 to 4 indicators, not every single one is one that we can track. If you're willing to do the work. What that means is if you're willing to have some focus group or surveys, because that does allow a very different kind of data gathering. And some of the information that we want on things like, do people feel they belong to the community, are not things that are necessarily going to be, you're not going to be able to find the data point on this. So I think you need to, think about how much work would it be to gather that data? Is it worth it? Is it important enough? What we're going to do is have each group come up with from 2 to 4 headline indicators. Then we're going to come back and fight over them for 10 minutes, and it's going to all work out, you'll see. So, any questions before we count off and get to work?
Could you remind us what age group completes the YRBS?
Youth Risk Behavior Survey, there's 2 different surveys. One is a middle school survey, which is 6, 7, and 8. And the other is a high school survey, which is 9, 10, 11, 12. As much as possible, I've either put both or identified that it was high school as a default.
So each grade, not some of those grades, but everything.
Right, yeah, so I've tried to do that.
I'm hearing 2 different instructions. One is to go through what we just did with Jodi, which is the who, how would we find out and what happened, and the other one is to do the communication power, proxy power.
You're not going to do what we did with Jodi right now.
But it's part of the thinking.
Okay.
It's part of the thinking.
Yeah, you want to, as you pick these, you want to say, these are indicators that actually we could do this process with, and it would, we'd come up with some really important things.
But we're not gonna do that process.
We're not going to do that today.
No.
Because there was no way we're gonna get out of here.
No, we're not going to do that.
It's just to inform your thinking.
Yeah.
And really, it was actually a bit of a deep dive into communication power. It's the story that's going to tell. So kind of projecting forward.
Okay, everybody, we are going to end at 8:30, so we're going to start again. And despite my scheduling problems, I want to pat us all on the back, we're on time. So let's just take a couple minutes and hear a couple of comments. How did that feel? How was it?
Conversation.
It was really lively. Wow. People have strong feelings. and that's good. Yes, Scott.
Can I just comment that as someone that was in meeting number 2, and we came up with some of these things, it was fascinating how some of it changed, because we almost poo-pooed XYZ indicator because of what we thought. When you have other players in the room that have different points or different reference points of stakeholders, wow, it was as if it was a no-brainer. Of course we're gonna do that. And that's the beauty of this, that
Yeah,
you gotta widen your
really the
scope.
more perspectives,
Gotta widen it up, yeah.
the stronger these really are. I want to say a couple of quick points before we go into comparing these, but meanwhile, while I do that, if you can see these, you might want to look and see what's in common and what's different. A couple of things that I was in such a hurry to get you talking that I didn't say a couple things. One is number 10. How many of you picked number 10?
How many picked what?
This one and this one, 2 of you. Percent of calls to police crisis line involving mental health and or substance use and or homelessness. We talk kind of back and forth about the fact that this is not a great indicator. And in fact, we talked about using it as a placeholder because the percent of calls doesn't necessarily tell you whether these problems are going up or down. Part of it is whether people perceive that the crisis line is responsive. Part is whether, I don't know, people, it could be like if they need help, they're more likely to call. You know, they decide that, you know, if they're actually going to get the help they need. If they think that they aren't gonna get the help they need, then they don't call. There's just too many factors. So we kind of put it as a placeholder, but it still is important, and I think, you know, two of the groups did put that it was important to understand something about the kind of help that's available and how people are seeking it. So I think we still have to play with that a little if we decide to have that be one of the placeholders. Another one is, you notice, there's 4A and B, 5A and B, 6A and B. Whoops, I didn't tell all the groups what that meant. Some of you got it and some of you didn't. In each case, maybe Angie, you could, was it that you who came up with? Yeah, there you are. Could you explain that?
It's really, when it comes to data, it's a good way for us to look at a similar, like either youth attitudes or adult attitudes around substance use, or perception of use, or perception of risk. Like the binge drinking would be perceived risk. So if there's a high prevalence in binge drinking, well, obviously they don't think it's a risky behavior, that kind of thing. So we wanted to have a youth data point and an adult data point.
And that's why it's, it's getting at kind of the same thing for those different age groups. Some of it is about attitude and some of it is about behavior. So with that, do you want to say anything before we kind of get this together?
Just echoing what a great engaged conversation it was, and really kind of digging into the indicators on which ones could actually represent each other. That was another interesting point on, well, that one says this, but if we pick that one, that also says that and that.
I also really heard a lot of people saying, I don't know how you got this so quickly. The idea of a headline indicator, or he also calls it herd indicator. It leads the herd. If this happens, then it's likely. And all of you, just to give an example, I noticed everybody picked the % of high school students who feel they matter. And I heard some really interesting conversation about why that's important and what that means about some other behaviors. And I mean, I thought that was really interesting. So that is going to be one of them. % of high school students who feel they matter. Because every one of you picked that. Okay, let's just start, since we're on the left here. The % of children and youth meeting physical activity recommendations. Did anyone, another group pick that?
It's on number 2.
So, why doesn't someone from that group make your case? Why did you pick that? Group 3? Where'd that come from?
Look at me.
Yeah, no, please do.
Yeah, right. Well, I mean, as a community, but also, you know, as a country, you know, we deal with youth illness and childhood obesity and all the above. So we felt it's very important, not only that that's very important for our community, but it also all winds into how you feel good about your community and how you feel good about yourself. If you're healthy, you're active, you feel good. If you have a community that's a livable, walkable community that you feel safe in, you tend to be a healthier, more active
Okay,
child.
time's up.
Okay. So we could go on and on.
Yeah. One thing that a group that I was with talked about, which really struck me, which is kind of why I put it in there, is the difference between the high school youth, which was quite high. I mean, the middle school youth, which was quite high, and then the % of physical activity, people meeting the physical activity requirements, dropped significantly in high school, which I thought was pretty disturbing.
Get their
So-
license, they can drive everywhere.
What? They can drive
They get their
anywhere, right.
license, they can drive
So
everywhere.
anyway, we're going to go on. Percentage of Hartford residents living below the poverty level. Yes.
Significant, yeah.
Yes. This one, it didn't come up in this one. But it's a democracy. 3 to 4, you win. And unless this group wants to make the case, I don't know how to do this exactly, but yeah.
So I was in the group 2 over there that didn't put it on there, and we
Okay.
did think it was important, but one of the things we looked at, and it's not one of the 3 columns, was what could Hartford Community Coalition move the needle on? So what could we have impact on? So we chose something else from that category that we thought we could impact because we didn't know if we could impact poverty as a whole in Hartford.
Low-income housing.
Okay, I'm just gonna play a little devil's advocate here. Remember, this is a population level indicator, many parties, and so to me, I would say if lowering the level of poverty is important, and especially again, I did put those other, those two numbers. One is very high level of 65 and over poverty, very high level of 12 and under poverty. Those are both like out of the world, they're really disturbing. And I would say that if we decide that that is one of our important indicators, then what we need to do is get the right people at the table so that 5 years down the road, we're going to actually show that that poverty rate has decreased in Hartford. So I'm just saying that I think it is possible, even though, again, it's one of the broadest and the hardest to move measures because there's other factors. If a big factory leaves town, if Vermont goes into, has another hurricane, tropical storm or whatever, so.
So for instance, one of the things that HCC could do is to ensure all the right people around the table for a meeting to look at that, is that?
Right, and that's part of what we'll do in the turn the curve exercise is say, who has a part to play? And what is it that we need to actually, what are the strategies?
One of the things that I made comment about poverty level in the town of Hartford is that, let's face it, taxes are high, and we don't have a great deal of affordable housing, of low-income housing in the town of Hartford. If people don't have low-income housing, they're gonna be paying that much out, that's all part of the poverty rate.
And it is a big thing to bite off, so you might decide that's just not what we're gonna be focused on, I can understand that. Or you might say, yes, this really matters, this is something that we should be turning the curve on.
I'm just sort of confused by that argument, and I'm confused by, it seems like if we, and to be blunt, if we have a lot of low-income housing, then the poverty level's gonna go up.
Not necessarily.
No, I wouldn't.
Well, you have to qualify for low-income housing, so there's gonna be
Affordable housing.
affordable housing, but the fact is that if you're looking at the percentage of your income that goes to housing as opposed to other kinds of things, you can provide affordable housing, you can impact positively in many other ways.
It also relates to business and jobs.
Sure.
So there's a whole other side of it.
Another way of making the same argument, though, is there's this whole discussion about gentrification of the downtown
Right.
as something that drives families that have grown up within the town out into other towns. So it could be a situation in which the poverty rate of Hartford proper goes down, but it actually doesn't change the regional demographics at all. It just shifts it due to factors
Which we've seen in so many cities throughout the whole country.
Yes.
Yeah, like the big cities, that's a really good point. So that might be a reason, maybe poverty isn't your marker that you wanna use. Yeah, one more and then we're gonna move on to the next.
I guess I also can look at poverty as being education. So that if we can, start just pulling together groups of interested people to help to educate them about what are the resources in the area, what are things that we could do together. I mean, sort of like the mentoring program that Windsor County Partners has. In that, we come up with, group ways of doing and educating and giving confidence to families, not just the 12-year-old.
So again, that's an argument for having that as an indicator. Okay, we're gonna move on. We haven't decided yet, but, it's kind of looking like, right now, 3 out of 4 groups, okay. Rate of those leaving town for college who would return within 10 years. Now remember, this is the one that we don't necessarily have the data on. But you folks thought it was important to include, group 1 didn't include it, group 4 didn't, and group 2 did. Okay, so this is one that I think we'd all agree right now is weak on the data part, but we have something called the data development agenda that Friedman talks about, which is what, Jodi?
That is where you write up the plan on how are we gonna get it? How are we gonna get that data? And there's at the moment for that, there is some evolving data. There's places that aren't listed that could start getting at that data. Economic development organizations have some of that kinds of data and might be able to help get more. Regional commissions have some of that kinds of data for population levels. And the colleges are actually starting to collect some data on seniors in college, as well as the ones who just graduated, in terms of, do you feel you're gonna stay in Vermont? Can you find a job here? Do you wanna stay? St. Michael's College piloted that survey, and the Department of Labor is looking to do it throughout all of the colleges.
So this is a situation where I think people would say great communication power, great proxy power. Is it important enough and worthwhile enough, and does it tell us, is that something that we want to turn the curve on? Is that going to be an important contributor to this result, so much so that we're willing to do what it takes to actually gather the data?
I think it actually would not be that hard to gather the data, getting it on a year-by-year point basis, because you could just use the 10-year high school reunion, which would be a time that you're reaching out to all those kids anyway, and just,
That's a
use
good idea.
Facebook, try to find out where everybody is, and use that 10-year mark, and every 10-year reunion, you could get a data point for, like, where is everybody when they come back to town?
Smart. Absolutely.
Somebody else on the other side, like why we shouldn't maybe include this as a key indicator? Yes.
I want my kids to be global citizens, I don't care if they come back here.
I do, they have kids.
That's why we get to be global citizens.
What does it say about
They had 10 years
Hartford?
to explore the world.
If they want to come back.
So,
It's a community they want to live in, they want to come back to it. There's something good, they raise their families, whatever.
Yeah.
so one of the reasons I've run and served on the school board for a couple of years now is that I think that the aging of the population is the most important issue about the state. Demographics, that's the most important fact that tells you where our future is. And if we cannot retain and attract young people to start families here, we're going to go from being the second oldest state in the country to the oldest, and our problems and our prospects are gonna be horrible.
I have to say that, we all just come with our own biases and our own, I raised my kids in Rutland County, and I saw the town of Brandon go from a dying, old person's very poor town. Wow, it is thriving. There are so many new young families, as well as people now coming back who would never have come back. So it is interesting. I mean, maybe another way to look at this would not be people coming back, and maybe you just want to look at the age. I don't know, maybe the ages, and we can certainly get that data. So maybe that's even a better indicator. Is it attracting people, not necessarily the ones who left, but is it attracting young people?
I think that that's really important, like I think there's a whole group of young people who are coming to Vermont because Vermont is Vermont. Because you can live in Burlington and you can go sailing in the morning and hiking in Mansfield in the afternoon. And Colorado is way too crowded now. So, I think there's a whole nother demographic population that may be moving into the state that doesn't speak to that high school student returning piece.
Right. But anyway, oops, too bad, that wasn't on it, so.
It's okay, we can change.
Yeah, we can change. Okay, so maybe we do wanna, maybe there is something about the age of the residents living here, that maybe that's important, and maybe that's something and that's obviously something that you can get great data on, so maybe we would just,
Median age of Hartford residents. something
And,
like that.
I mean, that would be interesting. We, if it's, I'm making it up, if it's 52 now, we wanna see if we're gonna, if we're doing things that are actually going to lower that median age. No more birth control, everybody has babies. I don't know. You have to watch for unintended consequences too. So, all right, quickly. This wasn't, let's see, we did have poverty.
Yeah, poverty is on 3 of the
Yeah, poverty,
4.
okay. So this one was, okay. Substance abuse, 6A, and substance misuse. Okay, did anyone else have that?
It was 6A and 6B.
We just said
Okay, you do have 6A. The percent of high school students who drink 5+ drinks in a row. And that's what you folks, where is that here? Where is that?
We don't run, there, 6A.
Oh, 6, okay. Yeah, substance misuse, 6A and 6B. All right, I have to say that in the group I was sitting in, at one point, I heard some pretty persuasive arguments about that being kind of a headline indicator that leads lots of others. But maybe from one of you who didn't, well, maybe somebody needs to make the argument about why we would want to include that.
Well, we didn't have this on our group, but I think the biggest reason why you want to include it is it points to, I think, boredom and lack of opportunity and lack of ability to do something else. I mean, I don't think people drink because they have a bunch of fun other things they could do, or they've got a serious disease. So I think it points to the resources we have in our community to help people get out of that situation, but also the ability to stop people from getting into the situation with other opportunities. But we didn't have that in our group, so.
Somebody else have something about why we want to include that, or why it probably wouldn't be a leading indicator?
So we actually on group 2 split between 6A and number 10, which was percentage of police, calls to police and crisis lines. And since I was for number 10, I'll be arguing that. I think that because that's a way of indicating those people who not only are engaged in risky behavior, but perceive themselves potentially as leveling for call rates and things like that, but to perceive themselves and who are trying to do something about it is a real indicator of how bad things have gotten for a segment of the population. So you may well have a segment of the population who's drinking or drugging and think that they're fine. And
Right.
There's no perception of, and in fact, there are some people who are very productive despite the fact that they're alcoholics and things. So it's when it starts to have a community impact is that when you start seeing those kinds of things.
So I just want to say, group 4 picked another version of, attitudes or behavior on substance use. Percent of students whose parents think it's wrong or very wrong if someone their age drinks. Does someone from group 4, and we only have a couple minutes left, want to defend this as opposed to 6A and 6B, which are kind of partners, and we would probably do both of them? Or is 6A and 6B a reasonable enough proxy for that? Group 4, anyone want to rise up and say why this is a better one?
We actually, I was in group 4, and we actually tossed back and forth 6A and 6B, and then 4A and 4B. I think it was just we were trying to figure out what would be a great proxy to bring in an overall, the biggest bang for our buck. And we were thinking, well, students and parents and the number of people involved.
And you folks did not come up, group 3, with a substance use one, which is interesting because we had a lot of those. So, I don't know what to say about that.
It wasn't that it wasn't discussed, it's just that it didn't rise to the top.
Yeah, yeah. So, do group 3, are you comfortable still with not having an indicator that relates to substance use?
I was in group 3, and I'm looking at it. I think all of these seem pretty complex to us. The factors very weighing into those, and we were really trying to look at overall population level things. But in thinking again about 6B seems to me tricky because that's Vermont adults. That's a big group. But the 6A one, 20% is a lot. So that's 1 in 5 kids who's basically getting really, really drunk once a month. And I think that, in thinking about ability to change, would be one that, if you could even get it down to 15%, that would be huge. That would be, a big impact, or 10%, where it's only 1 in 10 kids as opposed to 1 in 5. And so I think in terms of potential for change, that would be something.
So are folks okay with having 6A? Is that, so maybe we'll have that, I don't have mine. Where is 6A? 6A. Our cheaters here who did more than 4
Overachievers.
Overachievers. All right, right now, we're running out of time. And what we have is percent of high school students who feel they matter. Now, what was the other? We had something about the age, right?
Median age.
And did we have something about poverty? Is that what we also?
3 of the 4 was
Three of the 4 were poverty.
Yeah, so I think that we will
Which is number
probably
top of
have
your
to
list of
go with that.
Poverty.
Poverty, which is here.
Mm-hmm.
And this sounds good to me, but I didn't hear the other groups kind of come on board. So this is 1, 2, 3, and 4A, 6A. And because we're out of time, we're not gonna even talk about the others. How about that as a way to end? I think most of these are covered, and you guys had too many, so there you go. So these 4 we're going to go with, and to me, they seem like an incredible, you know, they really do get at lots of different parts of the community. I think they're really great.
For number 3, I'm assuming it's feasible to do it children.
So here's the thing. What I said to the group that was deciding between children versus older versus, when you say percentage of Hartford residents living below the poverty level, what you quickly get to is, and this is part of results-based accountability, is the story behind this story. So yes, it's 9.2%, but when you start to work on it, people will come in and we have the data that says the number of our elderly people and under 12 is huge. So we need to have strategies directed at that, and that will come out. So these nuances will come out.
I think with number 9, percent of high school students who feel they matter, a great deal of that is all about empowerment. Empower the student to be able to express that they
Yeah,
feel
no, I
they
think this is
matter.
I think this is a great one to have.
Yes.
So next is the next meeting, and do we know when that
We
is?
actually haven't made a date for that meeting.
Okay, so we'll hear about that. Wow, yes?
Next, a process question. So we've gone through this process to identify these 4. Does that mean that it's over and done at this point? The decision has been made and we're not gonna tweak it at all? Or is there some other layer of analysis that could come in, incorporating the input of everybody in this group, but not writing it in stone at this point? And having, you know, for instance, I have a feeling that, you know, if we approach this again and look at the 4 that have chosen, probably it might occur to somebody, well, we're kind of weighted in this direction, or this other thing is missing.
I think that's a really good point, and for example, I'm sitting here feeling like physical activity, you know, why didn't that make it? Because we didn't have time to really add it in.
You did
Other
cut
people,
me off.
yeah, you're right. Other people might go home and say, wow, that really matters. So I think that's a really good point, and why don't we send these out to everybody, and then get feedback, and see, I think you're right, I mean, this happened very quickly. And then we could get feedback looking at these, and seeing if there's something missing. You know, again, we had one that was a placeholder, we don't really have a good behavioral health one in here. So, and, yeah.
I don't wanna muddy the waters, but when people do look at this again, I just wanna throw one thing out, the percent of high school students who drink 5 drinks in a row. So I handle the youth substance abuse safety program, and it's kiddos that are caught with underage drinking. And no, it's not just Hartford, but one thing to keep in mind is they do a screening, and the majority of them that come through the screening are low risk, which means they're not at risk to be binge drinking all the time, they're not at risk to develop an alcohol problem, they're not being sent on for additional counseling. So it may seem like a scary number, but we also have to think about the fact that, yes, these are just the kids that are getting caught, but the majority of them are not these kiddos that we have to worry about developing a problem, so.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Well,
the
that's,
6-day data point
And
is the
just to-
self-disclosal.
To piggyback on what
Disclosing
Peter
of
was
themselves.
saying about the possibility of using number 10 as a proxy, there is a way in which number 10 tells the story about the progression of, let's say, meth into our community, the progression of heroin use over time. These things that have a lot of both proxy and communication power
Yeah.
and data power.
yeah,
Very strong
I
in all
feel like
three.
that one, it's not quite there yet, but I do think it's worth still thinking about how can we capture that.
And I would just say that when we were talking about that in our group, we had Carl with us who works for the police department. So we also didn't have someone that's really close to
Right.
that data as part of that conversation, and they could help inform us about really what the new data is, and you know, we didn't ask that. So I would just say, in terms of next steps, we talked about when we get back together to do the turn the curve, that we would really just invite the people in this room, because that exercise is not gonna make a lot of sense to someone that was not here tonight. So chances that everybody signs in on an email, with your email, so you would get an email to that turn the curve exercise, which will be sometime in February, March. And again, we just thought we would invite people that came tonight because that's who that exercise would, we don't wanna have to go through this or explain ourselves for 45 minutes to people that work for this part of the conversation.
So if
So-
you didn't sign it,
Right, please
Oh,
do.
yeah, I do sign it.
I'm not
And
sure
so,
where, when.
you know, we're gonna pick one of these things
Yeah.
and go through that exercise, which is really gonna help lay out the future, the most immediate future work of the Hartford Community Coalition, so.
And remember, this is just the beginning. Hartford Community Coalition will have a long and rich life, and others of these will be on the list also. So, again, we do love all of our children, but.
So look for
all
communication
of
from
them.
us specifically via email for that next exercise, because it makes the most sense to do that with. And then we'll have a broad, community, discussion in April, and we're thinking about a couple of different formats for that. So the first Monday in April will be April 4th, and that will be open to the entire community. And, we've got, we think, some good things planned for that, so we'll keep you posted on that, but we'll wrap this up before we launch into that.
So, great work, great group, and, not quite enough time. I'm sorry, I just couldn't get to all these, but, I think this is we've really got some kind of great sense of the group here. So, thank you.
for your leadership.
I'm just gonna make one shout out if you.
It is on purpose, yeah, it wasn't, duplicated for that reason.
Yes.